Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session Artificial Intelligence, Primer Risk Management, and Compliance Considerations. And I am Ritika Chakraborty. I will be your host for the day. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few house rules for our attendees. The session will be in listen only mode and will last for an hour, out of which last 10 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. If you have any questions during the webinar to the organizers or our speaker, use the Q&A window. Also, if you face any audio video challenges, please check your internet connections or you may log out and log in again. And very important announcement for our audience. We have started CPE credit certificates for our attendees. The criteria to get the CPE credit certification, the attendee needs to attend the full webinar and then write an email to cybertalks@ecouncil.org. Also, we would like to announce to our audience about the special handouts. Take the screenshot of the running webinar and post in your social media, LinkedIn or Twitter, tagging EC Council and use the hashtag CyberTalks. We will share free handouts to our first 10 audience. As a commitment to closing the cybersecurity workforce gap by creating multi-domain cyber technicians, EC Council pledges $3.5 million towards CCT education and certification scholarships to certify approximately 10,000 cyber professionals ready to contribute to the industry.
Did you know that you can be part of the lucrative cybersecurity industry? Even top companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, IBM, Facebook, and Dell all hire cybersecurity professionals. The cybersecurity industry has a 0% unemployment rate. The average salary for an entry-level cybersecurity job is about $100,000 per year in the United States. Furthermore, you don't need to know coding and learn from your home, and you get a scholarship to kickstart your career. Apply now. EC Council is pledging a $3.5 million CCT scholarship for cybersecurity career starters. Scan the QR code on the screen to apply for the scholarship. Fill out the form.
Now, about our speaker. Marlene is a senior level cybersecurity professional with vast experience providing strategic and technical direction in secure product and service delivery, architecture and assurance, risk management, and compliance oversight. She has led multi-million dollar security and technology initiatives, threat intelligence, and critical operations that support national and international IT enterprises and cloud services. She is also an expert in implementing secure architecture, identify and access management services, technical security controls, risk management, and compliance programs following US and international banking, financial services, healthcare, export laws, and various privacy mandates. Merlin has a track record of successful leading secure cloud development operations in encryption standards, virtualization, configuration management, continuous monitoring, service reliability engineering, and vulnerability management. Right now, without any further delay, I would like to hand over the mic to Marlene. Over to you, Marlene.
Thank you so much. Hello, EC Council, cybersecurity professionals, staff, alumni, partners, and friends. My name is Marlene Veum, and today we will be covering the topic of artificial intelligence. Let me go to the agenda. We are going to be covering a brief overview, a review of key terms and taxonomy, its network effect, the AI ecosystem and landscape, cybersecurity threats, considerations of best practices for alignment, management, and use, as well as resources you can refer to on your own. And we will have time for discussion and Q&A. It is impossible to cover this complex and dynamic topic in 1 hour. So with this, I am giving a point of view from a cybersecurity professional, and I hope you enjoy it and we learn from each other. If nothing else, I hope you will have new questions and seek those answers on your own, as I have provided many references. And I do apologize in advance. There is a lot of detail on the slides, and that is for the purpose of you being able to review this on your own and use this as furthering your understanding. And I hope you do dig into some of the resources and references that I have provided for you. So let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, I will give a brief overview on artificial intelligence. As you can see, the term refers to machine-based systems that can, for a given set of human-defined objects, make predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing real or virtual environments. AI systems can also be applied to tasks spanning diverse areas, including planning and optimization, perception and vision, modeling and simulation, natural language understanding, robotic process automation, recommendation, and prediction. These tasks can be accomplished through statistical inference extracted from training data, in this case, machine learning, or programmed logical reading, as well as with expert systems. And then artificial intelligence system use is based on human-based inputs to perceive the real and virtual environments, extract these perceptions into models through analysis and training in an automated manner, and these models are used for inference to formulate opinions for information and action. So I like to give a historical timeline for those of you who may have attended some of my previous talks. I always like to talk about how we got here. So we have to back up to 1950s, where John von Neumann and Alan Turing, who did not create the term AI, but are considered founding fathers of the technology behind it, they made the transition from computers and machines that use decimal logic. These are machines that dealt with values between 0 and 9. And the leap was to binary logic, which we know today, which relies on Boolean algebra dealing with zeros and ones. But these two researchers formalized the architecture of our contemporary computers and demonstrated that this universal machine, this thinking machine, is capable of executing what it is programmed. Now, Turing, on the other hand, raised the question of the possible intelligence of the machine, and he wrote a paper that is often referred to in artificial intelligence called Computing Machinery and Intelligence. In this paper is also described the game of imitation. And there's been many books and movies, as you might be familiar, but this game of imitation is where a human should be able to distinguish in a teletype dialogue whether they are talking to a person or a machine. Now, this article is the source of what we call Turing test or Turing complete. And it is questioning the boundaries between the human and the machine. So this graphic shows that AI is a superset of machine learning. And there were many historical milestones that along the way from the 1950s until present. And as we know, that AI technology is accelerating at an exponential rate. There is a very informative and entertaining video on the history of artificial intelligence that can be found on MIT's Tech TV archives called The Vault. I highly recommend that you look this up, and it is referenced in the materials, but it's called The Thinking Machine, and it's produced in 1961, and it was part of a series that CBS partnered with MIT to talk about technology of tomorrow. And this program is featuring many of the pioneers of AI. And it's about a 2.5 documentary, but I really think you would enjoy it. And in particular, it covers some of the topics that we often refer to today, but we may not understand the source of them. So in particular, there's a dialogue on the missionaries and cannibal problem. And it is a classic puzzle that demonstrates to a lay person problems solving under constraints that involve transporting a group of cannibals and missionaries across a river using a boat. So it's a logic problem. And in this video, you can see that the person is given the logic problem and asked how they would actually solve it. And they have a model of a boat and cannibals and missionaries, and they're trying to figure out and demonstrate how they would solve this problem. Well, the reason I think this is important for the understanding, and when you talk about machine learning, it's always derived from how humans learn. So this problem is a classic problem set, and in fact, if you were to look at Wikipedia at the missionary and cannibal problem, you'll see that it can be solved using a graph search method, and it's representing sets of states and operators and snapshots of the world, the operators, and the transformation, the transforms from one state to another. So this word transform is very important into the T of what we know as the common term of GPT, which we will get into in the terminology. Okay, so the next slide is really just a high-level overview on the types of artificial intelligence. So we have narrow intelligence, we have general intelligence, and then super intelligence. Super intelligence is sometimes also referred to as the singularity, where machines are smarter than the collective human minds, in particular in practically every field. And these definitions are highly debated, but in terms of what they really mean and the impacts that they will have, and you know, when they will actually become realized. But just know that in general, these are the types of artificial intelligence. Okay, so on the next slide, I'm going to kind of run through these very quickly because, again, we're laying the groundwork for what is artificial intelligence, its components, because we want to talk about the risks and threats to this emerging technology. So this graphic is from a Medium article, which I do reference. And from a cybersecurity perspective, just know that these components all have their own security, compliance, and privacy considerations, which we will highlight in the talk later. Okay, so it's important to understand key terms in taxonomy. So there are many new terms in AI, and they're in some ways maybe misunderstood, so it's important to have a reliable source. I was able to find a reliable source from the reference below, the European Commission Policy and Legislation for Shaping the Future. There is a document that's called Terminology and Taxonomy for Artificial Intelligence, and it includes a roadmap for suggestions and concrete activities aimed at aligning the EU and US risk-based approaches and it's derived from a group of experts that have prepared this initial draft on AI terminology and taxonomies. There's a total of 65 terms that have been identified, and I believe this will be a living document. I do encourage you to look at that, and then the mind map graph on the right here just kind of shows the taxonomy and what those terms actually relate to in terms of the components. Okay, so I meant to update the graphic on this slide to show hash marks for the time scale, but the bar charts highlight the unprecedented acceleration of AI technology. At the beginning of this year, UBS released a report that said ChatGPT is the fastest growing consumer application in history, having reached 100 million monthly active users in just 2 months after launch. In comparison, TikTok took 9 months to hit that number, and Instagram 2.5 years. So you can kind of see the scale for yourself. But given this accelerated pace, many cybersecurity professionals are trying to keep in front of the risks and challenges that come along with it. Okay, so the next 3 slides are really from a wonderful resource. And again, I highly recommend that you look at this on your own. This is from Dr. Alan Thompson, a world expert in AI, and his site is lifearchitect.ai. And here he maintains these wonderful visual bubble charts to show the size of the language models. These LLMs are the underpinning of the data that AI uses. And you can see here that this chart is showing the size of the most popular LLMs. But on the next slide, he actually maintains a Google Sheet. It's referenced here. You can download it in PDF form, or you can actually go to the Google Sheet itself. And this Google Sheet has a lot of information about LLM models, the ownership, links to the AI playgrounds, the tokens that have been trained, the training data sets, the sizes, and links to research papers for these LLMs and helpful descriptions for what the data set is based on or useful for. It's quite extensive. I highly recommend that you take a look at it. I did want to just show you a little screenshot, but it's basically a workbook with many columns and workbooks in this collective resource. Okay, and then finally, sorry, the graphics, the narrative on the left got a little bit jumbled here, but basically what I was calling out is that many of these, well, all of them actually, all of these are accessed via APIs, via web browser, via some kind of a client, and many of them do have safeguards in place, meaning that if you use the web front end to access the playgrounds, and again, the links can be found in the spreadsheet from the previous slide, there will be some content filtering, there will be some safeguards. Now, many cybersecurity experts have identified some of the loopholes, if you will, maybe some potential risks or something to be aware of, that if you actually use the API version to access the API models, you can maybe get different results or maybe be able to bypass some of these controls that are put in place. So something to definitely be aware of. Okay, so now let's get into compliance and risk concerns. So the cards here, I'm showing many of the concerns that are surrounding the AI technologies and the LLM models that underpin AI. So things like privacy, fairness and ethics, public policy and safety standards, intellectual property rights, economic impacts, and so much more are top of mind for governments, regulators, business leaders, cybersecurity professionals, and of course, individual consumers. So next, we will talk about some of the frameworks that try to define risk around AI. I will start with one from the National Institute of Standards of Technology, NIST, who recently published a vendor-neutral approach to how we can think about the risks in AI and a risk management framework that has a set of objectives and recommendations to have trustworthy AI. Right? And in this paper, you can actually see the 3 areas of potential harms related to AI. Harms to people, harm to organizations, and harm to ecosystems. And also some guidelines to mitigate these risks through what is being called responsible and ethical use. Okay, so the next point I want to call out is industry initiatives. So it may surprise many to know that as early as 2017, and I could argue even earlier, I'm sure, and through looking at the history of AI, yes, many that are familiar with the power of this technology innovation have called, raised concerns in many areas. But what I'm highlighting here, that as early as 2017, LinkedIn and eBay donated a combined $20 million to fund the ethics of governance of AI. And they were already then stating the urgency to ensure AI benefits to society and minimize harm. And then there's some questions that I highlight and ask below, which I would argue we are still trying to figure that out, is, how can we build AI technology that considers ethical frameworks, moral values, and what kind of controls need to be in place to protect society from potential harm? And then again, who gets to enforce these rules? And many may be aware that Elon Musk did back OpenAI in 2015, and he and others have since then and more recently come to the forefront, calling for a pause on the development and the reasonable guardrails. And just as of yesterday, or this week, there was private hearings in the United States where AI experts, including Sam Altman, Elon Musk, and others, came to talk to representatives in the US Congress about the guardrails and responsible use of AI. And there was an interview, since this was a closed hearing, there was an interview with Musk after that. And basically, he used the term, we need reasonable guardrails, but we need a referee to be put in place to oversee AI. So he was basically referring to legislation and other controls that would need to be in place on an international level in order to make sure that this technology does not have unintended consequences and harm. Okay, so many may ask, why the alarm and pause for AI? Now again, this is a very busy slide, but if I had to point to one single technical reason, other than the reasons we saw from the risk and compliance cards from the previous slide, there's a very technical reason why the experts are saying that we have to maybe pause or further understand the use of AI, in particular as we get into the what is a second phase of the AGI, the general intelligence. And please do your own research here, but I'm highlighting the concerns of AI models and a key component called the hidden layer. So off to the right, you can see kind of a deep neural network, and you can see inputs, the middle, which is the hidden layer, and then outputs. And anyone who's familiar with, let's say, databases, big data, etc., or even just for a layperson, you've often heard the term garbage in, garbage out. Okay, well, the issue here is that even though with all the training and the observations of what's going into the model, training the model and observing the outputs, the hidden layer is what we could call the brain of the deep neural network. And when training the AI models with inputs and observing outputs, the hidden layer is not well understood. And like many areas of science and physics, even though we can observe the cause and effects of things, for example, scientists and experts cannot fully explain how the hidden layer works for general intelligence. And this causes concern for AI being unpredictable and susceptible to manipulation and adversarial attacks. Okay, so kind of getting back to the NIST risk management framework and the potential risks, we're seeing, instead of a Venn diagram, we're seeing, kind of this silo here. So where does privacy fit in? Privacy is a big concern when it comes to this technology. And this quote from Nilo Christiani highlights some of the concerns about society's willingness to embed AI into daily aspects of our lives without fully understanding the consequences. In the conversation of AI, of course, there's no question or doubt that there's many good things and many potential advancements and things that will improve big world problems in society at large. However, the point being made here is that we do have to be careful about the accelerated pace and how we would maybe embed this into aspects of our lives without fully understanding the consequences. Thus, the need for guardrails and the referees, the regulators who can come in and help define that. Okay, so the next two slides are really covering the area of privacy once again, and what legal protections we have that could be challenged or fall into gray area for legal interpretation. And the history is quite fascinating around this for these two cases that I would like to highlight. And if it's any guide, there's two cases that in the United States that went to the Supreme Court and show some of the challenges that may await us. These challenges fall under our Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution, which calls for the protection of citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures. And then the Fifth Amendment, which protects individuals from being forced to incriminate themselves. It also protects people from being put into a double jeopardy, which means they cannot be punished more than once for the same criminal act. So the first case I would like to highlight was in 1928, and it's known as the Olmstead case, where Roy Olmstead was a suspected bootlegger. And at that time, we had a federal law under the prohibition that it was illegal to import, possess, sell illegal liquor. So Ray Olmstead was the subject of this case, and without judicial approval, federal agents installed wiretaps in the basement of Olmstead's building. So he maintained an office in the streets near his home. Now, Olmstead was initially convicted with the evidence obtained from the wiretaps, and the controversy was based on the legality for how those wiretaps were obtained and the conversations. And many had conspiracy around, the Prohibition Act, and maybe this individual was being targeted, and that this was unfair to have this collection and this wiretapping of information. At that time, the legal question was, did the evidence of the disclosed wiretap information violate the party, in this case, Roy Olmstead? Did it violate his Fourth and Fifth Amendment? And so the Supreme Court decided in 4-5 that wiretapped private telephone conversations do not violate the Fourth and Fifth Amendment. The use of wiretap conversations as incriminating evidence did not violate the protection against self-incrimination because they were not forcibly or illegally made. Essentially, they said the conversations were more like what you would say were voluntarily made. There was no expectation to privacy, similar to being in a public place. And so this was the law at that time in 1928. The next case is actually where that was overturned. And so in the next case, called Katz versus the United States, more than 30 plus years later, the facts of this case are that Katz was acting, so the authorities were acting on the suspicion that Katz was transmitting gambling information over the phone to clients in other states, which at that time was illegal. And federal agents attached an eavesdropping device because, again, it was not illegal to do that from the Olmstead case. And based on the recordings of these conversations, Katz was convicted on illegal transmission of wagering information across interstate, so gambling across state lines. On appeal, Katz challenged the conviction, arguing that the recordings could not be used as evidence against him. And noting the absence of a physical intrusion into the phone booth itself, the legal question was, does the Fourth Amendment protect against unreasonable searches and seizures and requires the police to obtain a search warrant to wiretap a public payphone? Well, in this case, as time advanced, technology advanced, This time, the Supreme Court ruled in favor for cats and said that there was a reasonable protection of privacy under the Fourth Amendment, and that these conversations would be protected, and that the protection applies to the person, not the place. And this was landmark. So the reason I'm highlighting this is because, once again, these areas are going to be challenged and are being challenged with artificial technology. And you can see that once something has been weighed one way, later in time it can go another way. So fast forward to recent times, there's an interesting paper you can download from Georgetown University by Raphael Davidian titled "Alexa and the Third Parties, a Reasonable Expectation to Privacy." The paper highlights Alexa's role in a recent murder trial and how the device could have potentially recorded and stored incriminating evidence. And it also inquires as to whether existing state consent laws around recording conversations can stand for protection, and then also the existing third-party doctrine, in this case it could be technology listening in, and whether or not there is a reasonable expectation of privacy if you willingly are using this technology. So in this case, the homeowner had Alexa, and knowing what Alexa is doing and consenting to the recording, but the third party that was in the home fell under getting recorded, and does that person have rights? So please be aware that these things are subject to be challenged. And then in the area of identity and citizenship challenges, we also see that I'm highlighting here the first citizenship. This is a post from the Jakarta Post. Meet Sophia, the first robot declared a citizen by Saudi Arabia. Now, for many of those of you who are following AI, you may be familiar with this, but just know that even the very challenges that we already have as the cybersecurity professionals around identity and being able to give the proper access rights and manage access, getting consent and so forth, when it comes to autonomous systems, and now even maybe having possible legal rights under citizenship, are also things that will be and are challenging in this space. Okay, and then finally we're going to talk about predictive technology and where this technology could cause harm to maybe profiling, advancing the area of profiling based off of being able to identify certain ethnic groups that's being called out here. So other things that we have to be careful about in terms of the human rights and legal rights of how this technology could be used. Next, we're going to talk about cybersecurity threats, classic. So some of those threats are spread of disinformation, deepfakes. We all have become very aware of the fact that it's accelerating the development of malware and attacks to bypass security protocols. If we didn't already have a problem with phishing emails in the trickery there, it's now what we would say on steroids. The ability to bypass safety filters, which we will look at in a very interesting use case that's getting a lot of traction. And then also the unreliability of AI itself, and how far do we want to go to let it have outputs and affect things that we may not really understand the basis for that. Okay, so cybersecurity threats unique to AI. I have classified these, and honestly, this is coming from a very good paper that I reference in some of the next slides, but there's what's called input attacks, where manipulating what's fed in to the AI system to alter its output. And then also poisoning attacks. This would be corrupting the AI system and the way that it works. You can see from the slide that we shared earlier that there's many new components, and any of those components could become part of an attack chain. They could be manipulated, corrupted, breached, and so forth. So the ecosystem and the trust boundaries are the same way we think about them today, but maybe with some newer technology, newer interfaces. So those need to be understood. And then also the idea of hacking the data model and being able to corrupt the very basis of the LLM, which the AI is using for maybe a special purpose. Okay, so this is one that got a lot of interest and called into question. So this is coming from the OpenAI chat, GPT-4, sorry, OpenAI GPT-4 technical report, which is actually highlighting an ethical concern with general AI. And in this case, you may be familiar where the ChatGPT was given some prompts, and the issue here was in being able to access a website and perform some kind of automated task. It ran into a reCAPTCHA, and again, kind of covering on the cybersecurity attacks and concerns. Not only is there concern about the ethics and the moral decisions that AI could make in order to accomplish a task, in this case, bypassing security controls by saying that the AI is actually a person who has a disability. There's also physical and digital attacks. And I am referencing the source of very good and very technical details around physical attacks and digital attacks. But the one I want to highlight is what's referred to as the stop sign attack. And this is the case where the model has been trained on what a stop sign looks like. Many different pictures, lighting, different environments where a stop sign could be. But the researchers simply put masking tape on a stop sign, and the AI was not able, the vision of the AI was not able to recognize it as a stop sign, and so it ran through it, not stopping. So you can imagine the implications of this for autonomous driving and the concerns that that AI cannot interpret all cases of what bad looks like. So it's trained on everything that looks good, but with small manipulation, in this case, masking tape, kind of diffusing the model in the picture here, that it was not able to see it as a stop sign, causing some implications of risk. And then, of course, digital attacks are very similar, where an overlay could be done, not only the physical concern, but even on digital media, where the similar things could occur, where the AI is not able to do a pixel verification or a distinction of what the object is in order to make the proper decision. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just also highlighting a very popular movie that came out around social media, and I think the same is going to be applied here. There is a concern that maybe people, the public, others are not fully understanding the implications of the data that they're sharing in these tools, and also the manipulation or the bias, rather, that the tools may have. And so in this book, the author has a very clever title called The Weapons of Math Destruction. And it's a very good read, and it's basically just highlighting that there's a lot of technology, for example, algorithms that are making maybe some of these decisions, or being able to frame things, the bias concerns and so forth, and by not understanding the actual technologies and how they work, what's behind them, the intended use, the unintended use, and so forth, that we need guardrails. And so I think this is something that we have to also highlight. We've seen some of the underside of social media, and there's concern that AI may have similar issues. So therefore, we have to maybe it is correct that we do slow down, or we have more education and awareness on this. Next slide, please. Okay, now I don't want to be doomsday at all, but it is in the conversation that on the extreme side of AI and what could go wrong is that it could be used to advance weaponry. It could change the state of warfare as we know it. And so as you're seeing, some of the machinery, the robotics are getting quite advanced, quite capable, quite strong. Here is a little picture down below showing that the Atlas robot is able to jump, do backflips. Many are using the advanced robotics in performing dangerous tasks, for example. So I would say that's maybe a good use. But there are real concerns about the misuse of AI, the misuse of the actual physical technology, robotics, and so forth that could interact with the physical space and cause harm. Next slide, please. Okay, so of course, this brings us to the emerging regulatory landscape. This past May in the US, there was another congressional hearing. This time it was open for the public. I have the link here where the three experts, including Sam Altman being one of them, testified before Congress about the about AI technologies and some of the concerns. And many of the suggestions that were discussed was, policymakers should explore ways to ensure that we have international cooperation on AI safety, and we need oversight. And some were calling for something similar to CERN for nuclear arms control, equivalent for AI, or some kind of a global AI regulatory body similar to Geneva Act for Artificial Intelligence. This hearing is a little over 2 hours, but is very interesting. And one of the key takeaways I got is there was a point where someone had questioned the panel and said, hey, all of you in the technology space, you innovators, you're usually asking regulators to step aside, and you're usually asking them to kind of hold off on having too much regulation, let the technology get off the ground, let it flourish, and then we can come in and regulate. Why are you coming to us and asking us to have regulation and put guardrails on? And all three of the experts said, because we do have concerns about general AI and things we don't understand, and how this could get away from us. And the other thing that was kind of mentioned and called into question, especially with subsequent interviews on this with many of the leading companies that are spearheading the development of research and use of AI, is, okay, well, should we put brakes on it? And basically the answer is no one is putting the brakes on because of what's called the prisoner dilemma. If someone's building it, so you have to build it. You have to basically be keeping pace with others who could have a competitive advantage. So everyone is still going to move forward because of that phenomena or thinking referred to as the prisoner's dilemma. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're wrapping up now. We'll go quickly through these, but I do have a checklist here on considerations and best practices. You can take a look at this and maybe start developing your own policies around this and research around this. At a minimum, you would want to have some best practices and some guidance. I think education and awareness is probably the #1 thing that all of us can do. And then also start thinking about ways to limit the use of AI. At the end of this checklist, I have API security and monitoring, because as we mentioned earlier, the way to interface or interact with AIs is through some sort of front end, a web environment, or otherwise an API. And so if you want to do some monitoring, you can take a look at the Google Sheet I referred to earlier. You can get all of the URIs, the links to those popular LLMs and AI projects, and maybe start doing some monitoring just to see where AI is maybe being used in your environment. And next slide. Okay, the next slides are really covering down on other best practices and guidelines. The White House has published the blueprint for AI Bill of Rights. I will not read it, but there's 5 tenets there that I think anyone could agree to those. Next slide, please. In the consulting space, Accenture, I'm highlighting that they also have come up with 5 principles of AI. In all cases, keep humans in the loop. And also the goal is that we be aligned, the alignment of how humanity will interact and use AI. Next slide, please. Okay, again, another fantastic resource. This is from the National AI Research Resource. And I do have the link here. You can download that. But I think this is also a very good read, and it's really laying out a phased approach to standing up the administration, policies, security framework, and cybersecurity infrastructure that would support this beautiful technology being used in a safe and responsible way. Next slide. Okay, this is our last slide. I'm calling out some of the industry frameworks. Microsoft has the responsible AI standards, 6 goals and 17 requirements. Google has their safe AI framework with 6 principles. I think both of these frameworks are excellent. IBM also has one. Go ahead and take a look at those and think about how you can start aligning your technology use to some of these standards and best practices. And then finally, we'll land on the resources that I used to put this presentation together. And I hope that you will spend some time taking a look at these and using these for your own awareness and for your own application of how to embrace this technology for all the good that it offers, but also be aware of the risks, the privacy issues, compliance concerns, and cybersecurity threats. And on that, I would like to thank you all. I apologize for the technical difficulties that I had with my system crashing. We got through it, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Marlene, and thank you to all our audience for being patient and being with us and understanding the technical glitch. So before we start our Q&A, today's webinar is in sync with our CDE Certified DevSecOps Engineer certification. Over 850,000 DevSecOps engineer positions are listed in LinkedIn as of 2022. The average annual salary of DevSecOps engineer is the United States is 118,000 US dollar. Even entry level position pay around 110,000, and workers with over 15 years of experience make more than 140,000 US dollars. If you are interested to know more, kindly take part in the poll that is going to be conducted now. Let us know your preferred mode of training, and we will be reaching out to you. So shall we start the Q&A, Molly?
Yes.
Okay. So our first question is, what stops AI from becoming smarter than us?
At this point, it really will require cooperation with governments and with private, public sector to basically understand and agree to the responsible use of AI. There is really nothing that can stop technology from being used. However, there is a level of sophistication in order to run AI, an AI environment, the LLMs, etc. So I think that it's easy to identify who is, running these systems, and that's why the life of the AI architect in that Google sheet, I think you will find it fascinating to see how many LLMs are there, the AI playgrounds that sit on top of those, what the intended purpose is, and the labs and the entities that are behind those. And again, most of this is really for good use, or can be for good use, but there's definitely a concern and an awareness we all need to have about responsible use.
Okay. So our next question is, which are the particularities you can consider more relevant to change a simple MFA by AI?
Yeah, that one I think is going to be tough because we already struggle with that with the multi-factor authentication already, and that is why the paper from OpenAI on ChatGPT, why the researchers call that out. And it is the case that many of the controls that we have that also fall under different compliance areas, such as the Disabilities Act, where we want to have, these capabilities in place for someone who truly is disabled to be able to interact with technology. But when there's loopholes, as discovered by the AI, when there's loopholes to this through social engineering or some other mechanisms that are advanced, maybe beyond our current understanding or capability to know what those are, in all cases, it becomes a challenge. And so many cybersecurity defenders and those who are developing systems using AI, incorporating AI, should be looking at these, robust testing models, making sure that the positive controls do not conflict with backdoors and loopholes. And I think that a whole new realm of testing and tools will be needed in order to, including tools incorporating AI, will be needed in the secure software development, in implementation, all throughout the life cycle. The earlier the better, and certainly in the operational and runtime environments. So we can also look at how these tools can help us look for these abuses and look for some of these newer attack methods that we may not know today, but this is, I would say, a good use of AI.
Okay, thank you, Marlene. Our next question, and to our audience, we are really sorry due to the time crunch we have to take, like we can take last two questions only. So our second last question is, how best AI can be utilized in preventing ransomware attacks?
Yes, I think some of the things I'm very excited about is many of the well-known and even some up-and-coming security vendors that are doing advanced things, incorporating AI into endpoint protection, into vulnerability risk management, into predicting these things in advance, risks and vulnerabilities, and automating the repair of those. So I think it's something to definitely be explored at a minimum. Even having the ability to detect these things, maybe you're not comfortable with having automation, do something like isolation and fully repairing something in advance of attacks. But I do think it's something that we have to look at, the predictive capabilities, and maybe where those make sense, start becoming familiar with those capabilities, even if you're just starting out with incorporating them into your SIM, into your detection and response, and certainly into your threat intel practices. I would say full spectrum, look at where this AI could actually help. I think at Google, Microsoft, certainly they have some very interesting capabilities within their security and compliance tools for their cloud services, and they sit on top of some very respectable LLMs that are special purpose for detecting advanced ransomware threats, TTPs, IOCs, etc. And I would encourage you to look into those and maybe start, thinking about how to utilize those in your own environments.
Thank you, Marlene. Our last question is, do you think AI can replace a man in IT area? If yes or no, what is your say in this?
So I am of the my cup is half full and overflowing. I believe that people, technologists, cybersecurity professionals, everyone should become educated and see how they can embrace the technology. And we've had many examples throughout time where something disruptive happened. Some would argue the digital camera was one of those that disrupted industry. And there's other examples that we could use, electricity, many examples where we could say, hey, something is changing here. But really what I would say is stay informed, stay educated, start using the technology yourself, understanding how it works, and really having the right questions to ask. As we have heard, prompt engineers, new job roles will be created. So there's a number of jobs that, new things that will be created. And I think a future talk would actually be looking at the emerging technologies and how do we advance the workforce. My passion is in cybersecurity. I'm already working on this, how to bridge people from Web 2 and current state technologies into the emerging Web 3, which is encompassing of AI, machine learning, decentralized technologies, blockchain. Stay educated, friends, and I thank the EC Council for giving this forum where we can even have the discussion. And the goal is not having all the answers, but asking the right questions. Please use critical thinking and know that if you do that, there will be many paths for your career.
Thank you so much, Marlene, for answering those questions. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we are looking for more and more sessions with you. So before we conclude the webinar, Marlene, would you like to say any message to our audience?
I just want to thank the EC Council, all of your facilitation and all the prep work that goes into preparing these, and really just being with lifelong learners. We are all lifelong learners. I'd love to hear from you. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Let's continue the conversation, and I hope that you have learned something today. I certainly have by preparing this, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much for the message to our audience. Before we end the session, I would like to announce our next Cyber Talk session, which is improving your multi-cloud security with a cloud-native application protection platform. CNAPP is scheduled for 20th September 2023 by Yuri Diogenes. This is expert presentation session. To register for this session, please go to our website, which is www.eccu.edu/cybertalks cyber-talks. The link is given in the top section already. Hope to see you all on 20th September. With this, we are ending the session. You all may disconnect your line. Thank you.